that the following footage can be disturbing at times, as well as rather confusing.
What does that
but
mean?
we'll do our best to explain what's happening as we go.
It was looking back at Mommy, who still holds power to her and still holds the ring, and outside of them is anger. I'm angry. Painful memories of children being cut up and eyes being taken out, animal sacrifices.
Where are the animal sacrifices?
There's a cat being sacrificed over here.
The International Society for the Study of Trauma and Dissociation was founded in 1984 by a collective of physicians and psychologists who shared an interest in abuse victims who had dissociated from their traumatic past, and in some instances created alternate personalities in the process.
The sexuality with infants and with myself. The upside down crosses. And I guess because of yesterday, seems like yesterday.
She's referring to herself in the third person, and the reason that she's doing that is because it puts some distance between her own personhood and the horrendous abuse that she has portrayed in the sand. So if she talks about it in the third person, it's as if it's not her, but it's someone else, and so then she can emotionally remove herself and not feel the effect. By that you mean all the babies
that I've had.
That you've given birth to?
Yes, that I've given birth to, either sacrificed or aborted.
If your hands would answer for me, if there are parts inside that in fact not only remember making that tray, but remember having the feelings as they talked about that tray. Are there parts inside? Everybody listen. Are there parts inside who remember crying and being choked up when talking about all the babies that were no longer, all the babies that you had, or that the body remembers having?
There were no babies.
Hmm?
There were no babies.
No babies?
No.
There's a yes finger that's right there. And as far as you're concerned, there were no babies.
At this moment, Dr. Sachs is speaking to one of Jamie's alternate personalities, or alters. This alter is a young girl called Becky. As you've just heard, Becky is claiming that the scenes of torture, animal sacrifices, and multiple abortions that Jamie staged in the sand tray earlier are a fiction. Dr. Sachs, anticipating these sorts of contradictions, has trained Jamie, the executive personality, as well as her other alters, to be able to speak via hand signals when a different personality is in the driver's seat. So what's happening now is that while Becky is denying the abuse with her words, Jamie is reasserting that it did in fact happen with her hand.
The last one was at 26, but I was married already.
And the first one was at?
Age 10.
10. So between 10 and 26, you had 12 pregnancies, correct?
Correct. The little girl will not look at any of this stuff. She was looking backwards at the little ones that are still inside of her, of the little one that's trying to stand up, the little one that's still crawling.
How many people do you
Are human brains complex enough to have multiple personalities? I just don't think so. I don't believe it at all. Yeah, I just don't believe that we're like wired. I don't think that the hardware is there to like load up like fucking like consciousness VMs or some shit. It seems all really dumb to me, but I don't know.
I think it took to put you in so many pieces?
Many more than it's taking me to put together.
That's right. You got it.
They're my babies.
Yeah.
So to recap, Jamie's therapy session has yielded claims of witnessing animals being sacrificed and having a dozen pregnancies between the age of 10 and 26, some of which were aborted, while others produced infants that were raped, mutilated, and sacrificed. At this point, you might be wondering, what's the explanation for this? Do Roberta Sachs and her colleagues perhaps hold the opinion that victims of abuse, in the process of dissociating with their trauma, create fictional scenarios in their mind that are so barbaric as to serve as a kind of distraction from real memories that, while not as graphic and horrifying, are actually more painful to relive, simply by virtue of the fact that they really did happen? No. That's a slightly more palatable theory we just made up right now. It is the conventional wisdom among the ISSTD and their associates that the sorts of disclosures Jamie made during her therapy session are, at least in the main, totally grounded in reality. Listen to them yourself.
It's not uncommon for an adult to suddenly recollect events which were occurring when they were small that had been completely held in a state of amnesia. And during the course of treatment, they begin to recover and report events of a satanic type. And these can be such things as having adults participate in human and animal sacrifice, even as young as 3 years of age, having their hands wrapped around a knife and committing a sacrifice and then remembering this. One woman had called the police 25 years later in the course of her treatment when she remembered some things that happened to her as a child.
Take one of my patients. She refused to kill someone. She refused to sacrifice a baby. And so they took her pet cat and they...
You agree that the brain does lock away traumatic experiences from childhood, right? Isn't that scientific facts, but it's not really understanding mechanics? I don't actually know. I'm not sure if I don't know. I would have to... Not having that happen experientially makes it hard for me to believe it, and then I would have to actually talk to somebody with first... I don't know. I truly don't know if I believe that. I'm not sure. The only time I can believe that memories are truly lost to you is if you're under the influence of some drug or some process that's inhibiting your short-term memory. So certain drugs will... If you drink enough alcohol, you can lose your short-term memory. The Rufinol or whatever, roofies can do that. But in terms of, like, truly losing a memory, like you actually seriously can't recall it because your brain is protected, I don't know, maybe, but I'm not sure. It's hard to tell because like 95% of the shit that you see people talk about today, like on Twitter and shit, I offhand just don't believe almost any of that. But maybe for truly traumatic experiences, maybe. There isn't any good evidence that people repress memories in a, for instance, like I believe that there can be some form of conscious repression where you try not to like think of like a cringy moment or a traumatic moment. But in terms of like truly like repress, I'm not sure. I don't know.
Tied it to a pole and wrapped it up like a mummy and gradually put it into a fire a little more and a little more at a time, so that it screeched and she saw her own...
In my accident, I blacked out and don't... Yeah, no, like, I can believe that. Like, maybe, like, yeah, if you get, like, if you have, like, a concussion or some crazy shit like that, maybe. Yeah, I don't know.
Pet destroyed this way, finally. They then told her they were going to do this to her and wrapped her up like this, like a mummy, with only her eyes showing. Then told her instead that they were going to bury her alive and threw her into an open grave and covered her with dirt. And then finally, after several minutes, dug her back up, unwrapped her in part, and said...
This video seems a little biased. No, DID is real. There are people with this. I have... Oh, are you the guy that was spamming about DID before like a million times because you were really mad that I said I didn't believe that DID... DID is one of like the most contentious things written about in the... apparently in the DSM-5. I don't know. Maybe if it's still in there by the DSM-6, maybe I'll be more convinced. I'm not sure.
Said, now are you willing to do anything we tell you to do? When they come out of this kind of threat, it's pretty hard for them to tell a story straightforwardly and without at some point under questioning having doubts if they should continue to be truthful and honest.
I would very, very, very much like to see from start to finish like a hypnosis session from one to the next, like from you have no memories to then you divulging your repressed memories. I hate that I'm even going to say this. I would hope that psychologists would be smart enough to know that everything that you say in a conversation can be extremely suggestive. But at this point, I've interacted with so many psych students that are actually like psych brain dead. That I'm actually not sure. I'm super curious. Like even a really, really innocent question like, oh, did anything happen to you in your childhood? Are you sure? Like even like a seemingly innocent question like that can be like incredibly provoking. And so I'd be really curious to see some of these like hypnotism sessions to see what kind of questions are being asked to figure out like what happened for what, you know? But I don't know.
When we began to get children in our practices who, well, in the beginning, really weren't talking about any abuse because they were terrorized into silence about what had happened.
If you think deity is debated, hypnosis is more contested. Everything related to psychoanalysis is cancer to modern psychology. Is that true? Because I've heard people go back and forth on the psychoanalysis thing, like in terms of like psychoanalysis was Freud's like only good contribution to psychology, and it's still practiced today. To other people saying it's like I don't think most psychologists believe that psychoanalysis is all like fuck. No, do they? It is controversial. Its validity as a science is highly contested, and its critics allege that it is pseudoscience. I took I took an AP psych class, so I imagine the equivalent of like a Psych 101 class in high school. And my understanding of psychoanalysis is that it's basically just talking to people a lot to figure out like what they feel and think or whatever. Freud's major contribution was individual therapy, talking therapy. Oh, maybe I'm mixing just that concept up with psychoanalysis then, maybe. So it deals in part with the unconscious mind. Oh, that's another thing that I really I don't know if I believe in like unconscious or subconscious things. I'm not a big fan of those memes, but that might be just my personal feelings. That might be all unfounded. Like, I think that there are like very, very slight like implicit biases that we can have towards things, but in terms of there being like a whole like subconscious, like unconscious like thing inside of you, like, I don't know if I'm into all that. I don't know if I buy. I'd be open to being challenged on it. But like, I think that any drive or anything that you have, like through some level of introspection, you could probably figure out. I don't think there's like these mysterious, like dark passengers or whatever inside of you that are guiding and controlling your shit. You just don't know about it. I just don't believe that at all. Can you expand on that? Yeah, I don't know. When people say like subconscious, like it feels like people think that there are these huge demons or these angels or whatever. There's something, I shouldn't use that language. People seem to think there's like some big driver on the inside that's like completely obfuscated. They don't have access to. It's like completely not there. I don't know if I believe that like that stuff exists. Like, I think that most of it is like relatively accessible in terms of like your, in terms of like let's think like I don't think there's like some conscious drive to like hate black people or hate women or something weird. I don't know how to give a word to that. I think that there is like a lot underlying in terms of things like your mood, or like maybe your grasp on reality, or maybe like stuff like that. I think that those underlying drives exist, but not subconscious. Like, oh, like you subconsciously hate women with the name Sharon, or you subconsciously hate like this. I don't know. It's hard to explain. I'm not sure.
Happened to them. But ultimately, over time, in the course of play therapy and with a lot of reassurance and help from the therapist, begin to reveal that there's been terrible kinds of abuses in out-of-home care settings, such as preschools and daycare, animal killings and blood rituals, and even human sacrifice, including the child being forced to perpetrate in that sacrifice. We're finding that you can abuse 100 children ritualistically with all the overlay of terror and brainwashing that's been discussed, and pretty much 100 children will keep the secret of their abuse until there's some kind of intervention.
One of the things that shows
he's probably going to talk about this in the video.
And pretty much 100 children will keep the secret. 100 children ritualistically with all the overlay.
Like if you go into therapy with the idea that like, oh, well, you've got abuse, you just don't know it, and I'm going to discover it for you. That sounds like an Anna approach to psychology, where it's like, I know that you're traumatized and I'm going to figure it out. Like if you go in with that idea, I can't see how you can get away from like implanting people with this idea, you know? I'm not as much of a tripper as you are, but I don't understand how stuff like shrooms/LSD doesn't bridge at least some part of the gap between your day-to-day conscious experience and other parts of your brain that you basically will never experience without external chemical influences. Or like, I think that there are like subconscious drives that you have. Like, I don't know how to put this into words because I would have to talk to somebody to figure out what they mean when they say subconscious. The contemporary understanding that subconsciously you're like, there's like a Wizard of Oz. There's somebody underneath you that's actually controlling everything. You don't know that person. I don't believe in that. I do believe that you have a bunch of like subconscious drives that run parts of who you are. So for instance, things that keep track of time, right? Like I can tell that it's been roughly 20 minutes since I started my stream, 30 minutes since I started my stream, right? I can tell that like, whether or not I'm hungry or not hungry. There are subtle things that affect my mood. So maybe like my appetite, maybe things like how much sleep I've had. There are subtle things that will affect, whether I'm hydrated, like pain, like these types of things I believe exist. Like 100%. And maybe you're not immediately aware of them because you don't need to be, because they kind of like are these automated processes that run. But I don't think there's like a different person inside of you that's like, that's your subconscious. Like I'm going to talk to my subconscious now, or I'm going to access my subconscious. Like I don't believe in that shit. That's what I mean. Yeah. Do you believe in hypnosis? I really don't know enough about hypnosis to say. I've heard that like, because the contemporary or the pop culture understanding of hypnosis is somebody waves a, like watch in front of you, and then you're in a deep sleep, and then you like they can access your subconscious mind. But I've heard other people like more describe like the idea of hypnosis is basically just like getting you to calm down and chill out, and then to have like a pretty like open and honest conversation with a therapist. So in terms of like that last one, like yeah, I mean I guess that seems like okay.
Terror and brainwashing that's been discussed, and pretty much 100 children will keep the secret of their abuse until there's some kind of intervention.
One of the things that shows up repeatedly in the sand tray is a figure of a dragon that has two heads that we have. And one ends up with a sign that says true, and the other ends up with a sign that says not true. And it seems to be a never-ending struggle internally for a patient, as well as for therapists, as well as for nursing staff, as well as for other professionals, because it is so difficult to imagine that humanity would be involved in anything like that.
I think part of it is it's painful to think that this may be true. And for me as a therapist, the first thing was it was painful. I don't want to believe this. And then when I hear it enough times, I can't deny it. It doesn't make sense to me to deny it, at least in terms of I'm hearing it. Then what happens is I get paranoid and I get scared. And part of the power of the cult, both with the individual and with the others around it, is its ability to induce fear.
One was a young girl who described at a fire, at a ceremony, being chosen to be thrown in and burned into the fire. But they said she could save herself if she picked another child to be burned, which she claimed is what happened, and she has to try to live with that experience. And a second was a young girl who, to show complete obedience, brought her best friend into a ceremony knowing that that child had to be sacrificed. And this is somebody under 10 years of age, probably 6, 7 years of age, and her friend was killed, and she was demonstrating obedience to cult authority.
Though we've said a lot of terrible things, a lot of scary things have been said here, we have to be careful that we don't get a mass hysteria and a paranoia.
So children all across the nation are being tortured, buried alive, and forced to sacrifice animals and other children, sometimes throwing them into fire pits. But hey, let's not let this turn into some kind of panic or anything. But despite ISSTD founder Bennett Braun's level-headed words of caution, when the notion that the sorts of things you've just seen him and his colleagues describe were actually happening began to gain traction, there was indeed a bit of what you might call hysteria. The most famous case, in what is now widely regarded as a moral panic, is that of McMartin Preschool in Manhattan Beach, California. The short version is this. The mother of one of the attending preschoolers became concerned when her son began experiencing painful bowel movements. She subsequently makes a complaint to the police that her son is being sodomized by one of the teachers. After investigating the claim, the police conclude there is not enough evidence to arrest the teacher in question, Ray Bucky. Still concerned about the possibility of abuse, however, they send out a form letter to 200 parents and asking them to question their children as to whether they have witnessed abuse or been subject to it themselves. The letter, understandably, proves to be quite the cause of alarm among many of the parents. From there, hundreds of children are interviewed at a therapy clinic called Children's Institute International, and there winds up being a very common pattern in the interviews. first a child would say there had been no abuse, but then after what could be fairly described as prodding by the therapist.
Did someone take pictures of the naked movie stars? Can you remember this part? I don't remember. As you said, no one took pictures. Nobody took pictures? I wonder why the other kids thought they did. Did you forget that part of the see, like, I want to read more of this transcript. I'm really curious in terms of the training. I don't understand this. I want to go be a psych major for a day. I feel like, okay, I'll be a little bit weird for a moment, or self-indulgent, I guess. I don't know if I'm autistic or other antisocial personality or whatever, but I feel like for a long time, talking to people and understanding how people communicate with each other is not something that comes intuitively to me. So I have to like watch people and understand like how people communicate, blah, 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 blah. And I feel like there are other people that do that. So I feel like I have a decent grasp on like, how do conversations work? How do people lie? How do people tell the truth? How can you tell if somebody is like, you know, making something up? Like, I feel like I have a pretty okay grasp on that generally. I'm not like a fucking mind reader or whatever, right? I still get like Doug a vacate and shit. Like, I feel like I generally have an idea of like when somebody's full of shit or not. I definitely, if I was in the process of interrogating somebody, I would absolutely know how to go about this conversation of figuring out like what happened and figuring that out via conversation without accidentally like implanting stupid fucking memories into people. Now, like, when you say shit like, are you sure that didn't happen? Or maybe you're not remembering shit like that. The only time I would ever say that is if I know that it happened and I'm trying to see how the person is going to lie about it. But if the person genuinely doesn't remember, why the fuck would you say stuff like that? Reeling all the way back to the front of this, I feel like a lot of people that study psych actually have no people skills. Like, it's very weird to me because, and I shouldn't generalize, but god damn, I've interacted with so many like psych majors or psych grad students that are genuinely just really not understanding how normal people process things or communicate. And that is really fucking strange to me. And then I read so many things about like psych students, like there's a name for this. It's like the idea that every single time in psychology, when you study a new disease, you think you have it. There are like specific names for like these pitfalls that psych students fall into. But it's like, it's so weird because I feel like I've talked to so many psych students who are the exact stereotype of somebody that would be a psych student. For instance, like you study psychology and then you think you can instantly diagnose everybody's like attachment, identity, whatever, personality, cluster, AB, whatever. Like you can do all of it instantaneously just by fucking studying like a couple paragraphs in a book. And like, but I would feel like it feels to me like if you actually care about the stuff you study, you truly couldn't make that dumb of like a thing, right? Like I don't know, it's crazy to me. Everybody feels like I don't think you guys realize how ridiculous this show is. I watched a couple episodes of this.
I feel like I've outpaced him intellectually.
Has anybody actually? I watched a few episodes of this because I was curious if it was like as crazy. You know, it's not. If you've ever seen House. Sherlock, now somebody's gonna say House was inspired by Sherlock, sure. The Sherlock BBC guy is like House on, not even on steroids, on whatever Zerk is on, just some insane okay, you're about to see deduction, okay, ramped up to a trillion fucking %.
Hi, so you're Sherlock Holmes. Ollie's told me all about you.
Jim works in IT upstairs. That's how we met. Office romance.
Gay.
Sorry, what?
Nothing, eh?
Hey. Sorry. I'll see you at the Fox, about 6-ish?
Yeah.
Bye. It was nice to meet you.
What do you mean gay?
That level of personal grooming? No, tinted eyelashes, touring cream around the frown line, tired, crab his eyes. Then there's his underwear, very particular brand. The fact that he just left his number under this dish.
Hold on, we haven't even gotten started yet, guys. We haven't even gotten started yet. That was the easy one. Destiny affords no suspension of disbelief to shows. I have plenty of suspension of disbelief, but you can only stretch it so much. Watson.
Afghanistan or Iraq? Afghanistan or Iraq?
Sorry, what?
I play the violin when I'm thinking. Sometimes I don't talk for days on. And would that bother you? Potential flatmates should know the worst about each other.
We don't know a thing about each other. I don't know where we're meeting. I don't even know your name.
I know you're an army doctor and you've been invalided home from Afghanistan. I know you've got a brother who's worried about you, but you wouldn't go to him for help because you don't approve, and possibly because he's an alcoholic. Likely because he recently walked out on his wife. And I know that your therapist thinks you're limp psychosomatic quite correctly, I'm afraid. It's enough to be going on with, don't you think? The conversation as you entered the room, a bit different from my day. So trained bard, so army doctor. How can you possibly know about the drinking? Every night he goes to plug it in to charge, but his hands are shaking. We never see those marks on a sober man's phone, never see a drunk's without them.
He deduced all of this because there was like a phone with like a scratch on the back of it or something. He was like, I knew that the name scratch on the back couldn't have been a dad, and it must have been a brother because... Oh my God. It's the 9 million I hear. Sorry, anyway, back to this. Okay.
They would say that there had been, and then a little further down the line, some of the children's accounts became wilder and wilder.
Oh, anyway, the whole point of that was...
40 wasted months, Nathan Weep.
No month here is wasted, Nino Sor. Every psych student fancies themselves as Sherlock Holmes. That's what I was saying. So a psych student will go in the car and they're like, oh, the way that you greeted me, you said hi. Now, not hey as one casually might do, and not hello as one formally might do, but hi as though someone is trying to keep the conversation short. Short as in you're scared to form a close attachment to me, means you probably suffered some sort of childhood trauma. I would assume you have some sort of attachment disorder that's probably led you to have a lot... Like that. This is like what psych students like obviously think they are after talking to somebody for like 2 sentences. Like unironically. But maybe I just talked to crazies on the internet, so who the fuck knows?
Babies, animal sacrifices, blood rituals, flying witches, secret tunnels, torture chambers, and even hot air balloon rides. In total, 7 of the daycare workers were implicated in the abuse. Fast forward 7 years and $15 million later, and the McMartin trial was cemented as the longest and most expensive in the history of the United States. No evidence of the ghastly rituals ever emerged, and the case resulted in 0 convictions.
Here is a real-ass question. What could they have done narratively to make this level of analysis not ruin a suspension of disbelief? So I don't know if people know truly like what double-blind experiments mean. I think people just say double-blind, 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 because it just sounds good. You just say double-blind or whatever. So... a single blind experiment is, I don't know if people mix these up, but a single blind experiment might mean that I'm running a test on a bunch of patients, and when I give them medication, I'm going to give some of them placebos, and I'm going to give some of them the actual medication. Okay, so that's a single blind experiment, and it's a single blind because there's a blind on the patients receiving the drug itself, right? But a double-blind experiment exists because it might be the case that when the doctor is prescribing some medication, if they know that they're giving the placebo or the real medication, there might be subtle differences in the way that they treat a patient or the way they treat them during a checkup that actually clues the patient in, I'll ironically say subconsciously, but clues them in kind of like, oh, this must be the real shit, or oh, they don't have high expectations for this medication. So then we have double-blind experiments, because even when it comes to giving a single fucking pill to somebody, we're worried that if the doctor knows who's getting what, the way that they subtly treat that person different might influence the way that that person feels and responds. So when you're asking me, like, how can you go about doing these things? Like, we're not on single blind, double blind. We're not on any level of blindness. You have a therapist that might be fully convinced of a certain like diagnosis, and you might have a patient who knows that that therapist is all in on that diagnosis. How can you call that process science? How can you call whatever process you're using here a scientific process by which you are somewhat objectively trying to arrive at some answer that is correctly divining what is true or factual in the situation, and you're not just setting both participants, both the therapist and the patient, up here in order to get like whatever it is they want out of this interaction, you know? So there should probably be a script that therapists follow word for word. I don't know. It's really complicated. For psych experiments, they often do follow a script. So when we talk about that one, the electric one where you shock a patient, not the Stanford prison experiment, but the, we haven't talked about this in so long. There were 2 popular ones. It was the Stanford one and the Milgram experiment, right? In the Milgram experiment, it wasn't even a script that was followed completely. It was a script that was followed by the professor on one end, and then it was an audio recording on the other end, so that they were getting consistent replies every time. In terms of like talking to a patient, I mean, obviously you can't just follow a script, but yeah, I mean, like, damn, like that you know,
basic rules ever emerged.
The implantation shit could definitely be real. I'd be worried about it, but
the United States. No evidence of the ghastly rituals ever emerged, and the case resulted in 0 convictions. That basic sequence of events proved to be somewhat of a template for dozens upon dozens of daycare scares throughout the states and across the world. A parent becomes concerned, police investigate, and therapists are involved. Children say nothing happened, then something happened, then the unspeakable and sometimes the impossible happened. No evidence is found, but the community is left shaken to the core. And it wasn't just children coming forward with these sorts of accounts. As you saw earlier with the example of Jamie, grown adults were coming out of therapy with memories of being subjected to unspeakably wicked acts. But just as with the daycare cases, corroboration was wanting. So what gives? There are only two real possibilities. Either satanic torture rituals were occurring en masse throughout the world, and all the perpetrators were just exceedingly skilled at completely covering their tracks, or all of the accusations, or at least the most heinous of them, were false. Hopefully you won't object to our suggesting that the latter proposition seems more likely. But if you are to accept that, you're still left with a big question that needs a good answer. How could it be that so many people, young and old, who had never come into contact with one another, were all coming forward with strikingly similar and vivid recollections? That is the question around which...
I mean, what could they have done on the Sherlock show to make you see that level of analysis from Sherlock and have you not pulled out of the show? Maybe it's... unironically, I think they do a really, really, really good job in House of showing you that level of analysis. Because there are times when House notices things that generally, I would say generally when House notices things, I think that they're usually like not impossible things to notice. But, and this is the most important part, there are a lot of times where House notices something very slight and he jumps and he makes a really, really, really keen deduction and it is completely and totally fucking wrong. And I think that that gives his like deductive abilities, I think it grounds them out a little bit more in real life. And there are tons of examples in the show where he will make like a big deduction. It's like, oh, and I see that you've done blah, blah. And then the other person's like, no, actually, like this is from that. And he's like, oh shit. It happens in the one episode with the,
You know what can get you 6 months? And a $100,000 fine. Falsely claiming that you won a medal in Vietnam.
You think I'm faking?
Canada did not send troops to fight in Vietnam, you idiot.
They sent troops to reinforce the 73 Peace Accords, which is where I tried to free a 12-year-old boy who stepped on a landmine.
Oh.
There's a lot of moments in the show where he will do something really big, and sometimes he's right, but there are other times where he's completely wrong. And I think I appreciate that for whatever faults or flaws or whatever. Actually, I say that, but I think House is generally a pretty good show. But like that grounds out his deductions a lot for me, which I think is cool. I can appreciate that. And then there are also times where, obviously through their whole like crazy diagnostic process, where they're wrong, you know, even though they think they've figured out like the key thing over and over again. So yeah. Shows like House, Sherlock, and Hannibal feel like psych anime. Maybe. I feel like, and obviously this is like one of the goats shows. I feel like of all the shows I ever watch, and it's such an entry-level accessible thing to say, but I think that Death Note did deduction probably better than maybe anything else I've ever seen. I think that just from a pure like logic point of view, I think there are a couple of jumps in the show where somebody
Stop stuffing your fat fucking
first of all,
mouth.
everything with Nier and
Someone
Mello
for shitting on
is
the Sherlock
stupid.
show.
Fuck all that, okay? But between like L and Light, I'm trying to think. I think there were a couple of jumps where it's like, do you really know that? Like, really? But I think that most of the deduction in that show is done really intelligently and pretty well. I would give that show like more so than anything else that I've seen that tries to do something like that. Well, the problem that I have, Wolfgang, with the infallibility is that, like, I'm trying to think of how I would say this. There are things that you can do to show somebody is infallible, and then there are things that you can do to show somebody is infallible. This is going to sound really mean. There are things you can do to show that somebody is infallible, or there are things you can do to show somebody is infallible, but you're not smart enough to write that character. That sounds really, really, really mean to say. For instance, like, let's say that you have a character and this character wants to hack into their friend's computer, okay? Like the way that like the writers of Sherlock would write the character is like he would be in the room and he would have like a mirror in his room and he'd look at the mirror and that would go out to a large mirror in the other room. And then anytime his friend typed in the computer, he could tell by the flexation of his muscles in his wrist or in his wrist and his forearm, like what letters he's typing. And that's how he would figure out the password, right? And then I would see a scene like that and somebody like, okay, sure, maybe that's kind of a stretch, but like, it's not 100 million% impossible, right? And it's like, okay, but like you could actually write that scene in an intelligent way if you were smart. So maybe like a smarter way to do it would be like a friend is like on his phone and he leans in to like ask his friend a question and he's not like paying attention or whatever. And then he walks away, but maybe his phone was like recording the whole time and his friend was like typing his password in to log into his computer, right? So that would be a way that you've done the same thing. You've gotten the same information from an intelligent character, but in one way you've written the scene in an intelligent way, but in another way, you're like relying completely on like some just insane level of like, there's a 4chan post about this a long time ago, but basically it sounds really mean to say, but sometimes I think dumb people write smart characters as indistinguishable from wizards, right? Where it's like, okay, well, if you want this character to gain this information, like we'll figure out like a smart way for them to do it. Like don't make them like do some insane shit. Yeah. So like this is the post I was referencing. Why do people hate, what's the big problem with Sherlock Holmes or whatever is basically, I think, the question from the OP. Because it has smart characters written stupidly. Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men is a smartly written, smart character. When Chigurh kills a hotel room, is it Chigurh or is it Sugar? It's Chigurh, right? Okay, I'm not like accidentally racial slurring or something. When Chigurh kills a hotel room full of 3 people, he books the room next door so they can examine it, finding which walls he can shoot through, where the light switch is, what sort of cover is there, etc. This is a smart thing to do because Chigurh is a smart person who is written by another smart person who understands how smart people think. Were Sherlock Holmes to kill a hotel room full of 3 people, he'd enter using a secret door in the hotel that he read about in a book 10 years ago. He'd throw peanuts at one guy, causing him to go into anaphylactic shock as he had deduced from a dartboard with a picture of George Washington Carver on it pinned to the wall that the man had a severe peanut allergy. The second man would then kill himself just according to plan, as Sherlock had earlier detected or had deduced that him and the first man were homosexual lovers who couldn't live without each other due to a faint scent of penis on each man's breath and a slight dilation of their pupils whenever they looked at each other. As for the third man, why Sherlock doesn't kill him at all. The third man removes his sunglasses and wig to reveal he was actually Sherlock Holmes the entire time. But Sherlock just entered through the secret door and killed 2 people. How can there be 2 of him? The first Sherlock removes his mask to reveal he's actually Moriarty? I don't know how to pronounce his name. Attempting to frame Sherlock for 2 murders. Sherlock, however, anticipated this. The 2 dead men stand up. They're undercover police officers. It was all a ruse. But Sherlock, Moriarty cries. That police officer blew his own head off. Look at it. There's skull fragments on the wall. How is he fine now? How did you fake that? Sherlock just winks at the screen at the end. This is retarded because Sherlock is a smart person written by a stupid person to whom smart people are indistinguishable from wizards. So my problem is that like when you get into a lot of these like heavily deductive shows, rather than using intelligent deduction, it's more like it feels more like just like absurd leaps of faith in order to try to divine like
If I meet somebody on an airplane and I say I study memory, they usually want to tell me how they have trouble remembering names, or they've got a relative who's got Alzheimer's or some kind of memory problem. But I have to tell them, I don't study when people forget. I study the opposite, when they remember. I study false memories.
This is Elizabeth Loftus. Loftus is a cognitive psychologist, arguably the world's foremost expert on human memory, and has been named by the Review of General Psychology as one of the 100 most influential psychological researchers of the 20th century. She has also been called a liar, evil, and a vicious predatory bitch. It's not exactly typical for a researcher to inspire such a level of vitriol. So what is it exactly about Loftus's study of false memories that has caused her to be the recipient of so much praise and contempt? Well, the praise part is quite straightforward. Early in her career, in the 1970s, Loftus ran a series of studies that were able to demonstrate that a person's memories can be significantly altered by suggestion. For instance,
in one study, we showed people a simulated accident. And we asked people how fast were the cars going when they hit each other. And we asked other people how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other.
I'm going to say this. I'm almost positive that I'm right, but I could be wrong. But I'm almost positive I'm right. This will ruin. I want you to mute everything, okay? Because this will ruin everything when it comes to car scenes for you, okay? Mute if you don't want to ruin all action films. I am 99% sure that when you're watching like car chase scenes and everything, I'm almost positive that every car on camera is moving like 25 or 30 miles an hour. They add sound effects and shit, but if you ever mute one and watch, you're like, that car's not really going that fast. There's just a fuck ton of cuts, and then they add tire squealing sound effects everywhere. But this thing is moving at like 25 miles an hour. Like, I don't think that the cars are actually ever driving that fast ever. Oh, and then the sounds of the engine too, because engines are perpetually shifting gears.
And if we asked the leading smash question, the witnesses told us the cars were going faster. And moreover, that leading smashed question caused people to be more likely to tell us that they saw broken glass in the accident scene when there wasn't any broken glass at all. In another study, we showed a simulated accident where a car went through an intersection with a stop sign, and if we asked a question that insinuated it was a yield sign, many witnesses told us they remember seeing a yield sign at the intersection, not a stop sign.
The susceptibility of memory to suggestion is known as the misinformation effect, and Loftus's research on it is responsible for a paradigm shift in how evidence such as eyewitness testimony is treated by the courts. But of course her academic work did not stop there. Later she became interested in whether the power of suggestion could do a lot more than simply alter someone's memory of an event that did happen. And her work on that question thrust her into the national conversation about the sudden boom in abuse accusations.
University of Washington psychologist Elizabeth Loftus says thousands of innocent people are being charged with abuse. Her book, The Myth of Repressed Memory, alleges that memories of abuse often are planted by ill-trained therapists.
Even though the patient says no, the therapist sometimes presses this sex abuse agenda.
Oh, we did watch this trailer. Okay, hold on.
It's okay. It's okay. We're okay. That's not okay. That's not where? Mom?
Like, listen to the engine noises and the tires squealing. But look at how fast do you think this car's actually going? If we mute it and just watch it, right? Without the sound effects. Like, how fast do we think we're actually going here? But like, when you listen to like the sounds of the engine and then all the noises or whatever, like, it's not a car. No, I know. I'm just saying that like, it's kind of like two huge disappointments you'll have. 3, 4, 5. There are so many like movie sound effects. So people fighting in real life, you're never gonna hear like when people get hit, right? And then like, when you touch a gun, guns don't really make any noises unless you're like, toggling the safety or like actually loading or unloading them. Like, if you move a gun around, this is the noise that it makes. Like, that's it. It's not like it doesn't make that. Drawing a sword from its scabbard, I don't know if they're called scabbards, if it's like a katana or whatever, is a really boring, disappointing sound. If you draw like a katana or like a kadoshi or whatever out of its like thing, it sounds like this. Because it's like wooden. It's not gonna make like that. Like that shit, that is nowhere. Unless maybe if you get like a steel fucking sword or whatever, like, yeah. Like, there are so many sound effects that have become like iconic from things that are just not even remotely resembling. So for every car scene, you basically have like 50 million like engine noises plus tires squealing everywhere.
Mom. Yeah. Oh my God.
Like, did they really stop that? Do you hear the tires on the stop there? I don't know. Okay. But, okay, sorry.
Maybe,
Terminator 2 motorcycle chase scene is iconic. I don't know if I've never actually checked if it's possible to load a shotgun this way, but it's so cool. You give him a pass. Where he flips the shotgun to load it. I don't know anything about like there are like weird like lever action shotguns or whatever. Maybe you can. That shit. That was such a good movie. You consider the fact that he's a robot? True.
interpreting dreams as evidence of memories breaking through, maybe doing hypnosis. And this climate of suggestion, I fear, is leading some patients to develop false beliefs and false memories.
Loftus cites as evidence an experiment she's conducting on volunteers at the University of Washington. Her research associate, Jackie Pickerel, has been able to plant false childhood memories in 25% of their subjects. She does so by first obtaining from a parent several real-life experiences from the subject's childhood. She mixes them with a couple of made-up experiences, like getting lost in a shopping mall, and has the subject try to recall all of them.
This is the time that you actually were lost from your parents for a little while.
I was lost from my parents.
This subject initially has no memory of being lost in the mall. But in a highly suggestive environment, not unlike some therapy sessions, Pickerel begins implanting one.
You were separated from mom and dad. How might you have reacted?
I'm sure that I was like very frightened and stuff.
Do you ever remember hearing your name on the PA system?
Yeah, I do remember that.
Could it have been this
It could have
time
been.
when you were 5?
It could have been.
Only a week later, the false memory of being lost has taken root.
Do you remember being lost?
Yeah, I feel like that initial like panic when you realize that your mom and dad aren't there anymore. And then the next memory I have after that is going to the security station and then hearing them call my mother and father's name over.
I think a really good thing that this kind of showcases too is our understanding of memory. I've said this a million times on stream, and I'll say it a million more times. People always seem to think that memory works like hard drives, like you record information, and the recollection of a memory is just basically reading those drives. It's not at all what it is. Like remembering something is like an active process of like reigniting these little pathways that associate feelings with other feelings, and you kind of like recreate something in your head every time you relive it. So like the idea that you theoretically could like just create new memories is not really completely unbelievable.
The loudspeaker.
Well, in fact.
Wait, the Terminator 2 chase scene, you can see the sped up film to simulate acceleration. Oh, so because they speed up all of this? Cool story, bro.
Being lost was false.
Really?
Yeah.
I never was lost. I had to have been lost.
What these studies are showing is that it is possible to get people to believe that entire events happened to them in their childhood that didn't really happen.
And as alarming as that revelation may be, there is a rather obvious objection to it. Being lost in a shopping mall is a far cry from being molested or tortured. This is an issue that highlights how researchers like Elizabeth Loftus largely have their hands tied. In order to research whether someone can have a memory of being abused by their parent or a caregiver as a child implanted, you would have to actually try to implant such a memory in volunteers. And of course, all the consent forms in the world will never change that from being a completely unethical endeavour. However, while we can't create an experiment like that, we can look at case studies that seem to fit the bill of Loftus's hypothesis that
gaslighting is the only thing because it fucks people's memories and perceptions of events. Yeah, kind of. I don't like the term gaslighting anymore. I think most people, there are a lot of terms that, I don't know, I don't like everything. A lot of times people just shouldn't use anymore. Grooming, gaslighting, people just shouldn't say anymore because nobody knows what these mean. Like, gaslighting has basically become like a catch-all for like emotionally abusive. Grooming has become a catch-all for like flirted inappropriately with somebody. Like, I think people just shouldn't use like any of these terms anymore because I don't know what any of them mean.
a suggestive therapist can convince their patient of abuse that never occurred. And as it happens, we have such a case study in the woman we saw earlier in the video. Roberta Sachs' patient Jamie has recanted all of her accounts of ritual abuse. She is adamant that nothing she showed in that sand tray ever happened. She does not have multiple personalities, and it was the therapists that messed her up, not her parents. While we're not in a position to see everything Sachs and her colleagues said to Jamie from day one, the training tape does contain some interesting moments that illustrate how suggestion can be much more subtle than stating aloud a specific thing that may have happened.
What I'm aware of is the complexity of working with the ritually abused client, and how one's never sure how much progress has been made because there is a continuing cycle of reverting back to denial of anything ever having happened, or to dissociating what has happened instead of maintaining the association in the here and now, so that the reality of the past is the reality of the present. It just is an unending battle.
Recall that when we played the session earlier, Jamie's alter, the child named Becky, stated that there were no babies.
There were no babies. There were no babies.
No babies?
No.
The idea that Jamie, when speaking as herself or through an alter, could be expressing the truth when denying the ritual abuse instead of affirming it is clearly not on the cards for Dr. Sachs. Any denial is a reversion, antithetical to progress in her treatment. You can see this dynamic in action while Dr. Sachs counsels Jamie. In this clip, Sachs and Jamie have just reviewed the tape of her sand tray session from several years prior. Sachs is now talking to Jamie, or in theory, Becky, about a trip they took to Epcot.
You like the small world?
Yeah, but imagination. He was fun.
Wait, let me just quick, 1 sec. Somebody asked before I left, is dissociation as contentious as DID? At first, oh, he just got muted. At first, when Katerina said that, it sounded like BS, but then I watched Dr. K video and it's pretty believable. I'm not gonna make any comment on Katerina's mental whatever. I have no idea. I'm not even gonna pretend to try to do that. Whatever. I think that so there are 3 terms. So you've got dissociation, you've got derealization, and then you have depersonalization. And I've seen people put out strict definitions for all 3 of these, and then I've seen a conflation of all 3 of these. I think that there's probably something there that's real or that exists. I'm biased, and I only say that though because I feel like I experienced that quite a bit. I would have that feeling for hours after my panic attacks when I got them after doing mushrooms like 6 months later. So that it seems to be something. But again, I wouldn't describe that as like another personality. Like, and there are also dissociative drugs. There are dissociative drugs, like ketamine, I think, is a dissociative, and I think there are others as well. But dissociation or derealization or depersonalization, whatever 3 of these terms you're working with at any point in time, is a much harder. Like, I think you can invoke that in a person or evoke that in a person with a drug, and I think it's not quite as fantastical or mysterious as like dissociative identity disorder, right? I think it's different.
Let me have Jamie back.
Okay.
Not that I don't want to talk to you. It's nice to see you. Okay, you heard that? Did you just hear that?
Yeah.
Okay. So Becky was there, but you were also there at Epcot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you saw a small world.
Mm-hmm.
And you saw imagination.
Mm-hmm.
You saw all the wonderful things that children would like to have if they could close their eyes and make a magic wish, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Why haven't you created that kind of history for yourself? Why is what's in the sand tray instead of the wonderful things you saw at Epcot?
To many viewers, it may come across like Dr. Sachs is asking Jamie why she can't focus more on positive things. But that is not actually her angle here. Sachs does not believe the abuse that Jamie staged in the sand tray was made up. What she's insinuating is that if Jamie were making
Sorry
things
about
up,
mislinking and the link being mobile Twitch. My forgiveness represented by $25.
Oh, I love you.
I feel like I've outpaced him intellectually.
Would you be willing to reveal the perspective, philosophy, and infrared debate on Hegel? I don't know anything about Hegel. Other than he's a German loser. Okay, how am I supposed to review that debate?
I feel like I've outpaced him
it would follow that she would make up wonderful, happy things, i.e., the abuse must be real.
For a gamer, Destiny's really shitty efficiency. OS, right? What am I? I'm just mining shit. I don't know. What the fuck am I supposed to do right now? Is there like something I can mine for more XP per hour? That seems like a decent thing. I get a lot of coal. I could smelt it later. No?
Because no one would want to imagine such a thing.
Oh, actually, I guess there's probably literally no point in smithing because all the best shit you get from like quests and like drops and stuff, huh?
I
Because
feel
you
like
say
I've
you made it
outpaced
all
him
up.
intellectually.
So if you're going to make something up, I want to know why that. What child creates a world that is so full of horror and can't create anything lovely if she's had a normal childhood? Tell me that.
So much of what is going on here is unspoken. What Dr. Sachs is asking, what kind of person with a normal childhood would choose to make up something horrific instead of something lovely, is actually a very good question. Perhaps someone in a fragile mental state that has been severely exacerbated by drugs, hypnosis, and other questionable therapeutic practices. But in the tone she uses, and the accusatory, skeptical look she shoots at Jamie when asking the question, it is again clear that she is not actually asking Jamie what led her to make up the abuse, but instead conveying disbelief and disapproval at the notion that she did.
And I remember saying that there was just this absolutely crazy feeling inside that I have to be the most wicked person in the whole wide world. And I want to be. I want to be the most wicked, awful person in the whole wide world. And I couldn't find enough wicked stuff to put in the sand. I wanted more.
Jamie?
What?
When were you born? Not the body. When were you born?
In May of 87?
In May of 87.
Okay, you're going to have to pay very close attention now,
Okay,
because this gets
let's go.
rather confusing.
Okay.
Jamie was clearly born much earlier than May of 87, because if that was her real birthday, she would be a small child at the time this was filmed in 1991.
We get it.
Jamie began inpatient treatment at Rush University Medical Center, Chicago in the mid-80s. That's where a lot of the theories and practices of the International Society for the Study of Trauma and Dissociation were initially developed. During her treatment for depression and compulsive behavior, several alternate personalities, including young Becky, were supposedly discovered. In the course of her years at Rush, Jamie, the host or executive personality, became what you might call better integrated with her alters, to the point where she could control them and function in the outside world. The result of that integration was essentially the creation of a new person who is now the executive personality. So Sachs' premise is that the Jamie that you're watching now is a different Jamie from the one that entered the hospital. Now keep that in mind for the next 40-odd seconds.
Okay.
And you're sitting here now telling me and using the present tense I just wanted to put everything that I could that was wicked in the sand tray. Did you just say that?
Yes.
Was it you that just said that? Did those words come out of your mouth?
Yes.
Okay. Did they feel like they were your words?
Yes.
Now, you tell me how we make sense out of that.
Don't ask me.
What's going on here is Sachs is scrutinizing Jamie's claim that what she put in the sand tray was driven by a desire to put out as much wickedness as possible. What she is driving at is that present-day Jamie should not be expressing from a first-person perspective any motivations for having made that tray, because the Jamie sitting in this room did not exist at that time. All of this serves to push back on the notion that the ritual abuse was not real and reinforce the idea that there is factual information held only by hidden personalities.
Do you think some of the QAnon shit comes from something similar to the suggestion stuff? All the talk of satanic rituals sounds kind of familiar. I think a little bit. I think before what I said is true. I think you only need 4 or 5 discrete pieces of information linked together in a certain way to tell a certain story, to where you can to where you can basically suggest whatever narrative you're trying to a particular person. So like, I don't know if people have like family to fall into QAnon. So like my family has. So like when I ask my mom and I try to like get her down in the weeds and they'll say, okay, well, what are you actually fucking talking about? Usually it's always retreating to some vague notion of like, I've watched the news, or like I've seen this myself, like I've seen these. And what they won't admit it, but what they're referring to is they've seen like a couple of 6-second videos, or they've seen a few very convincing Facebook memes. And there's just enough there to tie together like that version of reality. And then remember, once you have a particular version of reality in your head, every single thing you see immediately starts to become slanted towards that version of reality. Because when we engage with the world, okay, so we always have to start from one foundational understanding, right? Everything that you see is eventually like plays in a movie in your mind, right? So your brain is constantly putting the world together for you, right? Now, in one way, we have the very obvious parts of the world. So we've got like different wavelengths are reflected from things. So we have like visual images, we hear sounds, but that's like very fundamental. That we do way more than that. Like not only do we like have color that hits our eyes, we also can distinguish between like shapes and figures, but it also goes way, way, way deeper than that. Not only can we distinguish between shapes and figures, we can also think that we know different things about internal content about these things that we really don't have access to. But that internal content that you think you know, you actually have no idea, and that's all actually running off of all of these like underlying subsystems that are all built into these assumptions about the world around you. So that all sounds like a bunch of gobbledygook, whatever bullshit. But let's try to find a real example of this, right? Here's like a real example of how this could play out in the real world in like a pretty scary way. I could theoretically take a clip of, let's say I take a clip of a cop throwing a plastic bag into the back seat of a car. I could show that to a certain content creator whose brain is wired to think a certain way. And not only will they see that plastic bag being thrown into the back seat, they won't just see that and go like, oh shit, I bet he planted drugs. They'll take it a step further and they'll go, not only did he plant drugs, look at the way he tilts his body. He's intentionally moving in a way to plant drugs. Look at the way that he did it instantly. He's probably been trained to do it exactly that way, right?
Now this cop is trained. Take a look at the cop. Look at this. See how the cop turns his chest away from where he's throwing that? That's because he doesn't want his body cam to pick it up. He turns his chest away from it. See? Chest facing that way, drug plant happening this way. He knew. He has it on him. He just, whoop, yep, does a little slippy.
Now we're actually inventing so many more facts to go along with just what really all we saw descriptively was just somebody throw a plastic bag in the back seat. We don't really know anything else, right? But we've already started to think and create so much more narrative behind this that isn't given to us via our senses. It comes to us via like this deduction in our brain where we're deducing or divining all of this internal content that might not actually exist, right?
The body cam footage for the clip we watched earlier was released. The cop didn't plant anything. It was an empty bag that fell out of the driver's pocket. So they're looking at this one guy and they took the baggie off of this guy. To be honest, the thing that he recorded could have well been a plant. It just wasn't this time, but it could have been. A cop surreptitiously dropping something in the car, a well-known tactic to plant evidence. This time it looks like it was just like a weird sort of coincidence, but okay. All right, well, I guess there's nothing to be outraged about here, so I'll unretweet the tweet.
You learn who a person really is by what they assume. Yeah, and the things that they assume are often the things that are what they're familiar with. That process of inventing all of that narrative and it being completely wrong, it seems like kind of a meme, but it's really the same thing that QAnoners do, or people that believe the election was stolen, right? You only have to see, so many videos of whatever you want for you to begin to believe that that's reality,
This group of people, they're shouting at the reporters and the photographers saying that those are ballots in there.
They don't have the watermarks on their ballots.
Fraud right now.
We are watching voter fraud.
Hey, look, they got suitcases right here. There they are, folks. There's the ballots. We're going to go to the other side, and we're going to show you what's inside of the back of those fans.
Your GoPros, your indoor lights.
Yeah, and my LU600 and my tripod.
Your tripod, yeah. So it's camera equipment. Camera equipment.
Well, you have some.
I think that would be induction in this case. Sure, it would be induction or abduction. You're making inferences, not necessarily deducting. Sure.
Actual information held only by hidden personalities.
Well, you have some pretty heavy issues to deal with that don't have any easy answers. But one thing I know, and that is if you choose to spend forever on true and not true, you're never going to learn how to be a human being. You're never going to...
This reminds me of some things people say about weebs. Curious.
Experience what it is to be something other than empty.
Sachs is a true believer in satanic ritual abuse, so in fairness to her, it is worth remembering that she really is trying to help. But it can't be overstated how psychologically damaging it can be to tell someone that they will forever be empty inside unless they settle on what's true, with the underlying implication being that what's true is a history of horrific abuse. Her therapy session with Jamie demonstrates the power of suggestion via intonation, body language, and even at times, borderline hostility toward a patient that isn't giving you the answers you want. And based on the behaviour we see from Sachs, it isn't difficult to imagine how Jamie may have been influenced to stage scenes of ritual abuse, or to accept the idea that whatever she imagined was a factual representation of her own past. Which links back to an explanation as to what might account for the sudden avalanche of daycare abuse allegations in the late 80s and early 90s. People are generally very good at picking up on what other people want from them, and, as a rule of thumb, want others to approve of them. This applies all the more to small children. So when they're sent to a therapist who already suspects abuse, and they don't initially confirm those suspicions, they will very often pick up on the signals of disapproval they get back, whether they be verbal or non-verbal, intentional or subconscious. And when they receive encouragement upon saying that maybe something did happen, things continue to escalate. You might still wonder how in so many instances things escalated to the dizzying heights of satanic mass murder, and there isn't one catch-all explanation for every case. But suffice to say, it isn't actually that difficult to get from point A to point B if the therapist treating the child believes in that sort of thing and is ready to read into certain behaviour. Check this out.
All of those animals go in the grinder. Does anything else go in the grinder? Yeah. And in it goes. Yeah. In it goes. What we're seeing here is how children will reenact the rituals in which they have been involved. This one involves what they called the grinder. It took a while for us to know what the grinder was. The grinder is where human and animal body parts are pulverized. Then the remains are eaten by the rest of the cult members who stand around the grinder and chant while the pulverization is taking part.
So that's the short explanation for how the satanic panic era occurred. Parent suspects something, kid won't confirm anything, kid sees a clinician of some kind who believes in stuff like giant body part grinders, kid starts confirming things, story makes the news, more parents get concerned, more kids go to see grinder ladies, and things just sort of snowball from there. A bit reductive maybe, but that is more or less what the phenomenon boiled down to. Though while the satanic panic is probably the most famous era within the memory wars, it is
one of my favorite self-confirming, self-convincing memes is for all you guys out there that are just getting into them young girlfriends and shit, is when a girl first becomes sexually active and then every single month she worries about having her period and then she thinks she's pregnant, and then every single symptom that you get for the next week basically confirms that. So like girl starts getting anxious and nervous. As a result of that, she wakes up and then she feels a little bit sick to her stomach. And she thinks because she's sick to her stomach, it's morning sickness, so she's probably pregnant. Then it feeds more into her anxiety. And then she starts getting like weird cravings for food because she's thinking about it. And then she like misses her period, or she just spots for a little bit because she's so fucked in the mind that it's starting to fuck with her period. Like that, dude, I did that shit with my ex-wife so many times. And it's like, I noticed that every single fucking thing that can ever happen to a woman can always be mistaken as like a pregnancy. And it's like a really fucking stupid thing. But it's another good example of this kind of dumb shit. Yeah. It can also happen if you try to self-diagnose yourself on like WebMD with symptoms or with mental illness or whatever as well, right? That you're very good at, you can start convincing yourself of things very quickly.
Is not representative of the entirety of the debate, and it would be unfair to present tales of animal sacrifice and babies being thrown into fire pits as the beginning, middle, and end of the repressed memory argument. Memory is a funny thing. We rely on it for so much, even though it isn't exactly reliable. There's a good chance you've recently been in a situation where you were absolutely certain something happened in a particular way, only to be confronted with proof that that's just not so. It happens all the time, and for the most part, we just accept it as a fact of life. A person's memory is not an exact record of what happened at any given moment in the way a video camera is. It is malleable and prone to being distorted by any number of factors we have no control over. That isn't to say, however, that your memory is something you should put absolutely no stock in. You might get someone's name wrong once in a while, or be certain you parked in a different spot on occasion. But unless you're suffering from a serious cognitive disorder, you're not going to wake up tomorrow to find you don't remember where you work and can't figure out why you're not sleeping next to Mila Kunis. Your memory does tend to have your back when it comes to the big stuff. As a rule, it will not completely wipe significant events wholesale, nor will it make up vivid experiences that never happened at all. As a rule. But are there some conditions under which your mind could do either or both of those things? These two questions have been the source of much controversy over the years, and although both are often asked in the same breath, they're worth examining separately. We'll start with the notion of the brain wiping memories, not just inconsequential ones like a conversation you might have had with someone at a party, but what could be some of the most significant moments in your life. Barring a neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's, can your brain simply get rid of things like that? This guy thought so. You likely recognize him as Sigmund Freud, the founder of psychoanalysis, and a man whose legacy is divisive for all sorts of reasons, not least of which is his contribution to the notion of repressed memories. Back in his heyday during the 1890s, Freud treated many female patients who had been deemed to suffer from hysteria. That may sound somewhat politically incorrect today, but back then, hysteria was recognized as a legitimate neurotic disorder that manifested in symptoms such as depression, anxiety, insomnia, convulsions, and any number of other things that would generally indicate someone is not in a good headspace. Freud came to posit that the root cause of these women's ills was repressed trauma. That is, that they were molested by their fathers in early childhood and had pushed the painful memories out of their conscious mind. These same painful memories were now festering in their unconscious mind, resulting in the symptoms of hysteria. Only by bringing their histories of abuse out from below the surface and addressing them could the woman be cured. And so Freud set to facilitating the recovery of those repressed memories with the help of hypnosis, purporting that patient after patient had seen their marks of hysteria completely subside after coming to terms with their history of abuse in graphic detail. The thing is, a few years down the road, Freud completely dropped his theory and stated that all of those memories his patients wound up relating were not actually legitimate memories at all, but rather incestuous fantasies. It may come as a relief that we will not be exploring that idea any further in this video. But just because Freud recanted his theory of repressed memories of childhood sexual trauma being to blame for a litany of mental health issues did not mean the notion died with him. Many others would carry that torch through the years, though for the most part of the 20th century it remained largely on the fringes until what we'll call the repression renaissance of the 1980s. A good note on which to circle back to Holly Ramona, the young woman suffering from bulimia and depression who came out of therapy certain she was molested on numerous occasions by her father. There were plenty of questionable decisions made by the people treating her. Both bulimia and depression often have hereditary causes, and patients suffering from either or both conditions frequently respond well to treatments such as cognitive behavioral therapy and/or a regimen of prescribed antidepressants. This is based on decades of cumulative research from a range of health organizations, including the International Journal of Eating Disorders and the Journal of Consulting and Clinical Psychology. The mother takes her daughter to see a therapist. The therapist does not prescribe cognitive behavioral therapy or antidepressants.
Hi.
She does, however, inform them that up to 80% of patients suffering from bulimia were molested in their childhood. This is based on absolutely nothing. The daughter cannot recall ever being molested as a child, but based on her symptoms, the therapist still thinks there is a high likelihood she was. And
oh wait, does this go into DID shit? On how the suggestibility from therapists can like invent things in people's minds?
Encourages the young woman to spend the coming days and weeks digging a little deeper. And so she does. The young woman, still not receiving anything recognized by medical literature as effective treatment for bulimia or depression, begins actively trying to recall memories of being sexually abused as a child. And over time, they start coming to her in what she describes as sort of black and white freeze frames, moments throughout her childhood from the age of 7 to 16, where she was molested by her father, and even at one point, forced to perform oral sex on the family dog. But despite the fact that the memories the therapist thought might be there are seemingly starting to surface, the young woman admits that she still has some doubt as to their validity. And so the therapist's next course of action is to inject the young woman with 750 milligrams of sodium amytal, a drug known to dramatically lower inhibition and induce hypnotic states. The young woman is told that this will help clear up any misgivings she may have about the truth behind her recovered memories, as sodium amytal is a truth serum, and once she is under its influence, she will be rendered incapable of telling anything but the truth. This again is based on absolutely nothing. During the amytal interview, the young woman recalls more and more vivid memories of abuse, and afterward, she and her mother become firmly convinced that she was in fact the victim of countless horrific deeds at the hands of her father. Countless horrific deeds that she literally had no memory of at all until just a few months ago. That was the story of Holly Ramona. In 1994, her father, Gary Ramona, became the first person in American history to successfully bring a malpractice suit against a therapist of whom he was never a patient. He was awarded $500,000 in damages, having lost his family and his career as a result of the accusations that stemmed from his daughter's therapy. The verdict also made him the first to win a suit against a therapist on the basis that they had implanted false memories. A major victory not just for Gary Ramona, but also for critics of the theory of repressed memories. However, winning a battle does not mean winning a war. Many mental health professionals continue to maintain that repressed and recovered memories are an all-too-real phenomenon, and Gary Ramona remains estranged from his family. His daughter and ex-wife are still adamant that Holly's recollections of abuse were absolutely genuine, as are the people who treated her, though even some of them aren't quite sure about the whole dog thing. But when actually listening to Holly speak, it becomes increasingly difficult to write off her recollections as being entirely conjured by unscrupulous therapists.
Children who are abused, we're caught. Either way we go, we can't win. We say something when we're younger, they say they're too young, how could that happen? We say something when we're older and we feel safer, well, it happened so long ago. Either way, you get attacked.
Do you get a feeling now as to why you feel you repressed all those memories?
Looking at the response that what happened in trial and with the verdict and the press, it's very scary to say something knowing that most of the people aren't going to believe you and they're going to make you out to either be crazy or fantasizing. They're not going to understand.
And why do you think you initially repressed them? Because they were so traumatic?
I think because they were so traumatic. I had to survive. I had to go on, wake up in the morning and go to school. And to do that, you can't have this in the back of your mind.
I guess it's hard because we don't cut open the brain and look at it, but what would even be the neurochemical process by which you would conceal a memory? Is there some neurotransmitter that kills different synapses, or I don't know. I just don't buy any of it. I'm sorry, I don't.
They're my memories and it happened to me. I know my father. I lived the situation. And unfortunately, they didn't come out in the way that I wish I could present them in a real nice, neat package, but this is how they came out. And this is how child abuse sometimes works.
But it's hard for me to believe that 11 years went by, and at age 16, you know what's happening to you at 16 if you're being sexually molested. And for her to 3 years later she remembers she was sexually molested for that long.
But she was beginning to have some flashbacks. She didn't know exactly.
I think those are real good questions because I think
the brain is fucking weird, dude. It's the only thing we don't fully understand in the human body. One thing that I think is true is I think that there's a lot of stuff if you've ever gone from being religious to atheist, you've had these thoughts before, or you've had somebody pontificate about how deep these thoughts are. But there's a lot of stuff that exists right now in the natural world that is incredibly complicated, somewhat mysterious, and very difficult to fully comprehend. Maybe impossible to fully comprehend because it's just too multivariable. But I feel like sometimes that's not enough for people, and then they have to start making up other stuff, which I think is a little sad. The brain is incredibly complicated. We don't 100% understand plenty about the brain, but it feels like sometimes that's not even enough. Like, well, it's not just that the brain is complicated. It can also store multiple personalities. Like, I don't know.
It's normal for everybody to think that. How could you repress something so terrible? And it was such a close age range. What I want to say is that I wish it was a dream. I would give my life if it could be a nightmare and not be true. But the reality is it is true, and the reality is so painful, you don't want to remember it. That's why you repress it.
Sincere and resolute, Holly Ramona is not the picture of the confused, easily manipulated girl that might come to mind when simply hearing her story from another person. And her example is one that encapsulates what can make this subject so difficult to explore. For on one hand, there are plenty of reasons to be dubious about the therapy that precipitated her disclosures, but then on
$5. If you get abused and traumatized and cry your eyes out and Terry's no escape, would your brain really want to remember that to cause pain to itself?
Yeah, but the problem is that at some point, you have to like... It's like you can only do so many things, right? Like if you I could make up so many stories using that same rationale. Like let's say I cut my arm off. Like if you cut your arm off and you were bleeding so much that you knew you were going to die, would your body really not seal its blood vessels? If you put your hand on a stove and the pain was so great, would your hand not simply stop feeling pain? There's like if you broke a bone and the bone was actually broke and there was no way to fix it, would your body, if it couldn't go on, like you can make up like a million different things. Your body can only do so much. It can do a lot, but it can only do so much. And the idea that something is too traumatic to bear, so your brain just like develops these whole other mechanisms, I think in some ways because people don't want to see the brain as being like living within the bounds of these kind of like physical, biological realities either. The brain needs to be this mysterious thing that's capable of doing like all of these wonderful, amazing things, you know? But like it's not. It's still confounded or confined within the properties of like whatever it is, right? Like it can't perform magical tricks, you know?
the other, we simply weren't there. And there is no escaping a nagging feeling that there is a special place in hell for us if we doubt her and she is telling the truth. And that phrase, in and of itself, represents a very important caveat. While some do doubt that she is telling the truth, literally no one, not even the father she is accusing, thinks that Holly Ramona is lying. Anyone who has recovered memories of abuse, whether they be real or implanted, is going to come across as sincere because they're going to believe what they're saying in either event. As to whether others believe it, well, in situations like the Ramona case, that's very tricky. Because when you weren't there...
How do you feel about psychosomatic pain or symptoms? I totally believe it. I think you can have psychosomatic... I've had psychosomatic pain. I don't know why, and I'm even aware of it. The thing that's most annoying is that I'm even aware that all of this is like in your mind and it's like psychosomatic and stupid, and I'll still feel like all these stupid fucking things. I don't know why it happens or how it happens. Yeah, you can do a lot of like dumb things. If you've hurt your back, like lifting weights before or whatever, sometimes you can feel a pain that isn't there. And you have to like, actually like, okay, hold on. I'm going to bend over and do something. There is no pain there. I don't know why I keep acting like, right. There's like, you can trick yourself into thinking so much stupid shit insofar as like, is your body in pain or not, right? I think that a lot of chronic pain, theoretically, you know, there's a lot of like habit and ritual and everything built into that, you know? But then a lot of it, unfortunately, a lot of it actually can have like physiological feedback as well. Maybe pain isn't the best example because you can actually start to act in ways that will create real pain too. So for instance, if you had back pain at one point in time, and so obviously you avoid using your back as much as possible, and then you don't feel that pain, but anytime you go to use your back, you worry about feeling that pain. Well, if your back gets really, 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 really weak, at some point you are going to start to hurt all the fucking time because you literally can't do anything without it like using your lower back, and then you're going to avoid ever using it properly, and then you are going to start to feel pain, right? So physiologically, you can start to feed back into these weird psychosomatic things too, and like eventually fuck yourself as well, right? The mind is a pretty powerful thing, I think, yeah.
And you can't know, you're left with the possibilities of either condemning an innocent man of just about the most wicked thing a man can do, or further traumatizing a young woman who's only just been able to come to terms with her years of abuse, which is why the Ramona jury essentially tried to split the difference. They did find in Gary Ramona's favor, but the $500,000 they gave him was a fraction of the $8 million that he was asking for. The jury foreman would go on to explain.
Displace Gamer, $5. We do know the brain can limit how we remember pain. This is best seen on how women remember birth.
Sure.
While they were convinced Holly Ramona's therapists were less than cautious, and at least some of her memories may have been implanted, on the question of Gary Ramona's total innocence, they just weren't sure. So to revisit those two core questions that were posed at the outset of this video. Can your mind make up vivid experiences which never happened at all? Yes. Studies such as those pioneered by Elizabeth Loftus have consistently demonstrated you can manufacture memories with no basis in reality, especially with outside help. Exactly how vivid and traumatic an implanted memory can be is still a matter of some contention, but anecdotally, people with stories like Jamie's seem to indicate the answer is pretty damn vivid and traumatic indeed. Can your mind completely wipe these sorts of events wholesale? Probably not, but sorta kinda maybe. It's tough. A broad consensus among researchers of memory is that while it is very prone to distortion, it is actually significant events.
Your mind can suppress memories exactly to the degree that it can fabricate them. I disagree. And I think that, I wish I could find this article. I read this so long ago, and I think it was really well written. I think it was by some psychologist researcher. And I remember that basically in the article, he said something along the lines of like, human computers, hard drives, have been one of the most damaging things in terms of how people think human memory works. Because like remembering something and forgetting something, those are two vastly different processes. Just because you can do one doesn't mean you can do the other. Like the process by which we forget something is not the same as the process by which we might invent a memory. They're two completely and totally separate things. But when we think of hard drives, you just think, right, oh, like, are you writing zeros and ones to a piece of tape, and then are you overwriting them? Like, oh, it's the same process. Like, but it's not. I think these are totally separate things.
Your highest highs and your lowest lows that you are more likely to remember and recall accurately. In most instances of someone who's experienced
trauma suppression isn't forgetting something, it's just bearing it out. I don't know. And so like, this is the thing. I know it sounds bad. I don't know if trauma suppression is really a thing. I'm not sure about that. I know that it's passed off in like pop culture and everything like so commonly, but I don't know if that's actually like a research like, oh yeah, like you can genuinely completely not be able to recall certain traumatic events, except for in the cases where either one, drugs are involved, or two, some sort of trauma to the brain is involved, like an actual traumatic brain injury, like a concussion or something. Yeah.
Serious trauma, the thing they will need the most psychiatric help with is thinking less about what they've been through. However, you can't take what's typical as being the final.
Is this it? Whatever article this was, it was something I feel like I read this like 10 years ago, or maybe even before I started streaming. What do you know? Do our minds work like computers? When people discuss how the human mind use computer terminology and cognitive psych, we see the terms working memory for actively processing information and long-term memory for storing information. It sounds all like RAM and hard drive storage. This way of looking at the human mind perceives human thinking as information process, much like how computers process information. I was recently asked, but it was an accurate way of looking at it. Before I present my reply here, try answering the following question about whether you think our minds are like computers. Do our minds work like computers? Select the best answer. Yes. That's why we often use computer analogies to describe how the mind works. B, somewhat. We use computer analogies to describe how the mind works, but it doesn't work exactly like a computer. Or C, we're not at all that sure how the mind works. Computer analogies are useful, but our minds don't work like one. The answer is probably somewhere between like C or B. That'd be my guess. I guess like RAM and a hard drive are kind of analogous to like short and long-term memory, kind of depending on how like into the weeds you want to get with it. But the answer is somewhere between C or B, probably leaning towards C. Cognitive psych offers helpful insights for the design of learning, including blah, blah, blah. One of the most researched areas of cognition is memory. Research is not expression. We do know the mind does not actually process information like a computer does. We know that memory is not a tape recorder of our experiences, but there is much debate about how exactly.
Works, $5. What if it came as an evolution advantage to suppress torment versus having the mind clouded? For example, during hunting or being weary of predators.
that might be the case, but it seems unlikely, and we can only guess here. But my guess is that early trauma is probably pretty important to survival. Say, for instance, you had an early traumatic experience where a certain animal like hurt you severely. It would probably do well to remember that trauma to avoid that animal in the future rather than to just forget it, right? Forgetting things doesn't seem to be very evolutionarily advantageous. There might be some parts where that is, though, but that's really hard to guess, you know? What was the answer? The answer to the blog post is C. Oh, cool. Okay, good. Yeah, fuck it. All right. Sorry.
A word on what's possible. The problem with recovered memories of sex crimes is that the only way to verify their validity is to verify that those crimes actually occurred, something that is exceedingly difficult to impossible when they are reported 3, 5, 10, or even more years after the fact. So if this phenomenon is real, you can't exactly blame victims for coming up short with proof. And a final note on blame, and who and what to believe. It's important to state that trauma-induced amnesia is not the only or even most common reason given for delayed disclosure. Factors such as shame, fear, and a desire to wipe something from one's mind, rather than actually succeeding in doing so, are other big reasons that someone might hesitate in reporting abuse. And so when looking at cases where someone discloses something plausible and then in the process of therapy goes on to report more and more radical happenings, we could be looking at a multitude of intersecting factors. A genuine recovered memory or delayed disclosure that's followed by suggestive therapy that results in additional implanted memories and falsehoods. Just because we wind up with a case that looks suspect in certain areas doesn't mean nothing happened. When considering all of this, it becomes clear why the memory wars are such a heated topic of debate. Some of the most nuclear points of discussion in modern society, intermingled with raw emotion and inherently limited data, all adding up to a frustratingly scant amount of concrete conclusions. More frustrating still, it's likely a war that will never end.
Right about the time I was taking a new job at the University of California in Irvine, I got contacted by a woman who told me that, like many of the women who contact me, that she was so upset. Her daughter was estranged from the family. She was developing all these memories of abuse that the mother was positive never happened. And when I said to this mother, this sad new mother, I said, why don't you try to find out who is your daughter's therapist? Maybe we can find out it's one of the therapists who tends to be implicated in these cases. She went away and she came back and she said, I found out my daughter's therapist's name. It's Holly Ramona.
Remember to hit that like and subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so that my videos show up right in your feed.
Soothe you. Just a nice, warm, happy time.
Prime Minister of Malaysia, bad! Martial arts, good!